It was supposed to be my future. Something my grandma had promised me since I was little, my inheritance, to help me start my life. But apparently, a white dress and matching tux were more important than my education, my dreams, me. Without warning, my parents handed everything over to my brother for his perfect wedding. No explanation. No apology. Just a smile and a shrug like I didn't exist. I sat there, listening to them gush about flower arrangements and honeymoon plans, all paid for with what should have been mine. I felt like I was trapped in someone else's celebration, while my own life crumbled silently in the background. But here's the thing they didn't know: you can only push the forgotten daughter so far before she pushes back. So I smiled. I clapped. I toasted their fairy tale. And then I gave them my gift. They said they'd remember that day forever. Trust me, they will. What I did next shocked everyone. And no one saw it coming, especially not them. My gift wasn't wrapped in shiny paper or tied with a satin bow. It was something far more impactful. It was a single, unwavering look. A look that finally, after all these years, held the weight of my resentment, my disappointment, my utter and complete heartbreak. It was a look that said, "You have made a terrible mistake." The celebratory air around the dinner table shifted, subtly at first. My mother's smile faltered, the champagne flute trembling slightly in her hand. My father, ever oblivious, continued to drone on about the open bar they'd booked. My brother and his soon-to-be wife, caught in their bubble of premarital bliss, remained thankfully unaware. But the look, it lingered. It spread like a chill across the room, settling in the corners, dimming the forced gaiety. I held it, steady and unwavering, until my mother finally excused herself, a hand fluttering to her chest. A small victory, but it was a start. The following days were a blur of whispered phone calls, anxious glances, and a palpable tension that hung heavy in the air. My parents tried to act normal, but the facade was cracking. They'd catch my eye across the room, then quickly look away, their faces etched with a mixture of guilt and something else, fear. Then came the whispers. I'd hear snippets of conversations, hushed tones behind closed doors, frantic calls cut short when I entered a room. Something about a mistake. A missing document. A problem with the wedding venue. Each incident, small and seemingly insignificant on its own, began to weave a tapestry of unease. My brother's wedding was a week away. The invitations had been sent, the dress fitted, the cake ordered. Everything was meticulously planned, perfectly arranged, just as my parents liked it. Except, now, a subtle chaos was creeping in, disrupting their carefully constructed world. One evening, I found my mother sitting alone in the living room, staring out at the garden. The setting sun cast long shadows across the lawn, mirroring the darkness that seemed to have taken root within her. "Are you all right, Mom?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. She startled, as if she hadn't heard me approach. "Just tired," she murmured, her voice strained. I sat beside her, a strange mix of pity and satisfaction swirling within me. "The wedding preparations must be exhausting," I said, the words laced with a subtle irony that I knew she wouldn't miss. She didn't respond, just continued to stare out at the darkening garden. Then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, she whispered, "I think we made a mistake." My heart skipped a beat. Was she talking about the inheritance? About the way they'd treated me? I waited, holding my breath, for her to elaborate. But she didn't. Instead, she simply shook her head, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I just want everything to go back to normal," she whispered. Normal. What was normal anymore? Our family, once a picture of perfect suburban bliss, was now fractured, distorted. And I, the forgotten daughter, was the catalyst. The days leading up to the wedding continued to unravel. The florist called, claiming they hadn't received payment. The caterer threatened to cancel. Even the priest seemed to have vanished into thin air. Each mishap, each unraveling thread, brought a strange sense of calm over me. It was as if the universe, or perhaps Grandma herself, was intervening. Then, 2 days before the wedding, the biggest blow came. My brother, pale and shaken, confessed that the wedding venue had double booked. There was no other suitable location available. The wedding, their perfect fairy tale wedding, was on the verge of collapse. My parents were frantic. They made calls, pulled strings, offered exorbitant sums of money, but nothing worked. The wedding, their meticulously planned spectacle, was falling apart. And I watched it all unfold, a silent observer, a ghost in my own home. The night before the supposed wedding day, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through the silent house, the air thick with tension. As I passed my parents' bedroom, I heard muffled sobs. I paused, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Part of me wanted to comfort them, to tell them it would all be okay. But another part of me, the part that had been silenced and ignored for so long, held me back. I continued down the hallway, a strange sense of anticipation building within me. The house felt different, charged with an unseen energy. As I reached the end of the hall, I noticed a faint light emanating from beneath the closed door of the guest room. The room where Grandma's belongings were stored. The room that held the key to my future. Hesitantly, I reached for the doorknob. The doorknob turned with a soft click, and I pushed the door open slowly. The faint light came from a small desk lamp, illuminating a figure hunched over a table. It was my mother. She didn't seem to hear me, her attention completely absorbed by something in front of her. I stepped inside, the door closing softly behind me. The room was filled with the familiar scent of lavender and old paper, the lingering presence of my grandmother. My mother finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with a desperate kind of hope I hadn't seen before. Spread out on the table were stacks of papers, photographs, and old letters, all of Grandma's things. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on a particular document. Then, slowly, she reached out and pushed it towards me. It was a copy of Grandma's will. The original, the one that had bequeathed everything to me. The one my parents had conveniently misplaced. My heart pounded in my chest. "Where did you find this?" I asked, my voice trembling. It was here all along," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "In a box, at the bottom of her trunk." I didn't see it before. I stared at the document, my mind racing. It was real. It was actually there. But why? Why would she show it to me now, after all this time? After they had already given everything to my brother? I don't understand, I stammered, my eyes searching hers for answers. "Your father, he convinced me it was for the best," she said, her voice barely audible. "He said it was just a temporary loan. That we'd pay you back after the wedding." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "A loan? You used my inheritance as a loan for my brother's wedding?" She flinched, her eyes filling with tears. I know it was wrong. But your father, he was so insistent. He said it was for the family. That it would all work out in the end. The family. That word, once a source of comfort and belonging, now felt like a cruel joke. They had chosen my brother, his wedding, over me. Over my future. And now? I asked, my voice cold and hard. Now that the wedding is off, what happens now? She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously. I don't know, she whispered. I stood there, staring at her, a mixture of anger and pity churning within me. She looked so small, so broken. The confident, composed woman I had always known was gone, replaced by someone fragile and uncertain. Then, a sudden realization hit me. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about something much deeper. It was about the years of neglect, the constant feeling of being invisible, the unspoken resentment that had festered within me for so long. I want it all back, I said, my voice firm and unwavering. Everything that's rightfully mine. She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and fear. I'll talk to your father, she whispered. I left the room, the will clutched tightly in my hand. As I walked down the hallway, I heard the front door open. My father walked in, his face etched with exhaustion and worry. He stopped when he saw me, his eyes widening in surprise. "What are you doing up?" he asked, his voice gruff. I held up the will, a small smile playing on my lips. "I think we need to have a talk," I said. The following hours were a blur of tense discussions, tearful confessions, and painful truths. My father, initially defiant, eventually crumbled under the weight of his own guilt. He admitted everything, the lies, the manipulation, the desperate attempt to salvage his son's failing marriage by using my inheritance. The wedding, of course, was officially cancelled. My brother, heartbroken and humiliated, blamed me for everything. He couldn't understand why I wouldn't just let it go, why I couldn't just be happy for him. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I had been silent for too long. In the end, I got everything back. The money, the house, everything that Grandma had intended for me. But it wasn't a victory. It was a hollow, bittersweet triumph. My family was shattered, broken beyond repair. And I, the forgotten daughter, was left standing amidst the ruins, wondering if it had all been worth it. The weeks that followed were quiet, filled with a strange sense of emptiness. I moved out of my parents' house, found a small apartment of my own, and started to rebuild my life. I enrolled in classes, pursued my passions, and slowly began to heal. One evening, several months later, I received a phone call from my mother. Her voice was hesitant, fragile. She asked if we could meet. I agreed, my heart filled with a cautious hope. We met at a small cafe near my apartment. She looked older, more frail than I remembered. The confident, composed woman I had once known was gone, replaced by someone softer, more vulnerable. We talked for hours, not about the inheritance, not about the wedding, but about our lives, our dreams, our regrets. For the first time, we spoke honestly, openly, without the weight of years of unspoken resentment. She apologized. Not just for the inheritance, but for everything. For the years of neglect, the constant comparisons to my brother, the unspoken expectation that I would always be the one to step aside. I listened, my heart aching with a mixture of sadness and understanding. I realized then that she, too, was a victim. A victim of her own insecurities, her own fears, and the societal pressures that had shaped her life. We didn't magically reconcile. The wounds were too deep, the scars too prominent. But we started to rebuild, slowly, tentatively, like two strangers learning to trust each other again. And as I sat there, across from the woman who had once been my mother, I realized that my true inheritance wasn't the money, or the house, or any material possession. It was something far more valuable. It was the chance to finally be seen, to finally be heard, and to finally forgive. It was the chance to finally find my own voice, and to finally tell my own story. That conversation in the cafe was a turning point. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation, not a sudden rush of forgiveness, but a quiet shift in the tectonic plates of our relationship. A crack of light in the long, dark winter we'd endured. We began to meet regularly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for walks in the park. We talked about everything and nothing, cautiously navigating the minefield of our shared history. One afternoon, she handed me a small, worn photo album. It was filled with pictures from my childhood, birthday parties, family vacations, Christmas mornings. Pictures I'd barely remembered, moments I'd thought were lost to time. As I flipped through the pages, a wave of bittersweet nostalgia washed over me. There I was, a small girl with bright eyes and a gap-toothed grin, surrounded by the family I had loved so fiercely. I kept this hidden, my mother confessed, her voice barely a whisper. I was ashamed. Ashamed of how we treated you. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the confident, composed woman I had once known, but a vulnerable, flawed human being struggling with her own demons. In that moment, the last vestiges of my anger melted away, replaced by a profound sense of empathy. I understand, I said, the words catching in my throat. The healing process was slow, painstaking, like mending a shattered vase piece by piece. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, times when the old resentments threatened to resurface. But we persevered, driven by a shared desire to salvage what remained of our fractured bond. My brother, however, remained distant. He'd moved out of state shortly after the cancelled wedding, unable to face the shame and disappointment. He blamed me, I knew, for exposing the truth, for shattering the illusion of our perfect family. I tried to reach out, to explain, but he refused to listen. One day, months later, I received a postcard from him. It was a picture of a serene mountain landscape, the kind of place Grandma had always dreamed of visiting. On the back, he'd written a single sentence, "I think I'm finally starting to understand." It wasn't an apology, not a declaration of forgiveness, but it was enough. It was a flicker of hope, a sign that perhaps, one day, we could find our way back to each other. As for the inheritance, I used it wisely. I invested some, donated some to a charity Grandma had supported, and used the rest to pursue my dreams. I traveled, I studied, I explored the world and discovered hidden talents I never knew I possessed. I built a life for myself, a life that was finally my own. Years passed. The sharp edges of the past softened, the painful memories faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. My relationship with my mother blossomed into something deeper, more meaningful than I could have ever imagined. We learned to communicate, to trust, to support each other through life's inevitable ups and downs. One crisp autumn evening, my mother and I were sitting on her porch, watching the leaves fall. The air was filled with the scent of wood smoke and the distant sound of children laughing. "You know," she said, her voice soft and reflective, "your grandmother would have been so proud of you." I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached my eyes. "I think so too," I said. In that moment, I realized that my true inheritance wasn't the money, or the house, or even the restored relationship with my mother. It was something far more profound. It was the realization that forgiveness, like love, is a choice. A choice to let go of the past, to embrace the present, and to create a future filled with hope, healing, and the quiet strength of a woman who finally found her voice. It was the inheritance of self-discovery, of resilience, and of the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome even the deepest wounds. And that, I knew, was a gift that no one could ever take away. The memory of that evening still warms me, even after all these years. The crisp autumn air, the scent of wood smoke, the quiet understanding that flowed between my mother and me. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated peace, a moment that solidified the long, arduous journey we had taken together. Life, of course, continued to present its challenges, but we faced them together, united by a bond forged in the crucible of shared pain and eventual understanding. The inheritance, once a symbol of division and resentment, became a catalyst for growth and transformation. It allowed me to build a life filled with purpose and passion, a life that honored not only my own dreams but also the memory of the woman who had believed in me, even when others didn't. Grandma's legacy lived on, not in material possessions, but in the quiet strength and resilience she had instilled in me. And that, I knew, was a treasure more valuable than any fortune. If you enjoyed this story of family secrets, resilience, and the enduring power of forgiveness, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We delve into the complexities of human relationships, exploring the hidden depths of the human heart. Hit the like button to show your support and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on our next captivating narrative. Join us as we continue to unravel the mysteries that lie beneath the surface of everyday life.